I'm doing it. Now, I've put off reading this book for such a long time, but I feel like I haven't really felt any strong emotions lately, so hopefully this will do it to me. So this is going to be a reading vlog of me reading A Little Life by Miss Hanya Yanagihara. Now, I know everybody has already read this book, but I make very, very bad snap judgments about books that I know absolutely nothing about. So when I first saw this book, all I knew was that it was about like a bunch of men. And I was like, a book about a bunch of men? That sounds boring. Then I kept seeing people say it was like the saddest, most soul-crushing, devastating like experience they've ever had while reading a book. And the more I saw people physically sob while reading this book, I started to think, will I do that? Now, I don't really cry over books. Like the last book I think I cried over was like Where the Red Fern Grows in like 6th grade. Then again, I also don't really read a lot of sad books. I do not like books where the vibe is just nothing good is happening. I can do books where sad things are happening as long as everyone is happy in the end, as long as I'm happy in the end. I don't like to read books that don't make me feel good after I finish them. I generally regard myself as someone who is fairly mentally stable, but I did check the trigger warnings, so I am aware of the content. I think no matter your level of mental stability, you should know the type of things that go on in this book because they're going to be hard for literally anyone to read unless like you're a psychopath or something. But we're going to get started. Now, I did cheat. I started last night, but I'm only 60 pages in and nothing has really happened yet. So let's get started. So I just finished part 1 and I'm concerned for my mental well-being. Part 1 is not even 100 pages and I already really like this book. I've seen so many people say that, you know, the first part is kind of boring, the first part's slow. That's not true. The first part, you're getting to know each of the 4 characters. You get to know Jude and Willem, JB and Malcolm. They're all sad and they're all broke. But the way that she writes their stories is already just so beautiful. This writing, beautiful. So I know the rest of the book is gonna be rough. Like I'm already getting attached to the characters, which is a bad thing because I know she's literally just gonna rip them away from me. But at the moment I'm live, laugh, loving. I love reading about each character. I love reading their backstories, their personalities now. It is so interesting to see the dynamic between all 4 of them. It's so interesting to see the way that they perceive each other and the way that they view each other because they're all so different. We know the least about Jude right now, and I already know that Jude is going to have the most traumatic backstory. We already started to get to see a little bit of what's going on with him. When he made the pastries for the party, I will say though, the POV switch is definitely something to get used to because, you know, you don't really know whose POV you're in when you start reading it. You kind of just have to figure it out, and because it is so early in the book and you're just getting to know the characters, it's a little difficult. So I started tabbing each POV, like I gave each character a different shade of blue because I feel like blue is depressing and appropriate. So whenever I figure out whose POV I'm in, I will tab it. We'll say I'm not a huge fan of JB. Like, I get that he is supposed to be, you know, kind of a juxtaposition between Willem and Jude, but he's still annoying and he still complains about everything and he's just kind of an asshole. So he's my least favorite right now, but I'm trying not to be too judgmental because it is the beginning of the book and I understand the point of the book is that they each have their own lives, they're all going through different things and whatever. Right now I'm feeling okay. Still don't know if the book's gonna make me cry, but I do think it's gonna make me feel things. And it's gonna be interesting to see how this all changes as we keep going. Okay, so I've read a little bit more now. I'm on page 160, I think. Still in part 2, which so far has been all about Jude, and so far has made me really sad already. There have been so many moments where I'm reading about what Jude thinks about himself and what he thinks other people think of himself, and I'm just like, it is heartbreaking. And we're not even into the heavy stuff yet. Now, I do have a theory of what I think is going to happen to him, like not his past, but like his future and how he ends up. And I really hope it doesn't happen because I will not be, like, I'm not prepared for that, even though I think that's what's going to happen. Yeah, so Jude is already making me really sad, and we're just now getting into his time at the monastery, and I'm pretty sure that's where it all goes downhill. So. So I just finished part 3 and I was correct. The trauma has started. So far though, it hasn't been anything like super hard to read. There haven't been any super graphic descriptions. There's definitely been like sad parts or parts that make you feel for the characters, but nothing that has made me want to like stare at the ceiling and dissociate yet. Like, we're getting to know more about Jude and his past, and it's definitely sad. It's definitely not fun to read, but while we've been in his past, it's more so allusions to the things that have happened to him or are happening to him, and none of like the direct in the moment experiences, which I know those are coming, and I know that's what's going to be hard to read, but I'm still enjoying it so far. You know, I've never read a book where time passes the way it does in this one. Like, the book started, all of the characters were in their early 20s, and now they're like in their 40s, and their lives are completely different. Like, we're literally following the entire lives of these characters, and that's, I think, what makes people say they feel like they're so real. Like, it's just so interesting to see how they've changed since they've been in their early 20s. Did they or did they not accomplish all of the things that they wanted to do? They all have money now. They're not really broke anymore, but they're definitely still sad. Also, I was looking to see how many total pages there were, and I saw something that I am 99% sure confirms my theory on what happens to Jude. So that's really fun. Obviously, I don't know what happens in between and how it all happens, so it's not really spoiled, but still is not fun to think about. I'm still sticking by the fact that JB sucks, and JB is absolutely my least favorite. You know, throughout his little chapter in here, I was starting to feel bad for him. I was starting to understand his character a little bit more. I was starting to feel a little bit of sympathy for him. And then he did what he did at the very end of part 3. And I was like, yeah, never mind. Still don't like you. Now I'm about to start part 4, which is the axiom of equality, I think is what it's called. And I feel like I've seen this part mentioned a lot as, you know, one of the harder parts to read. So I have a feeling that everything I just said about it being fairly mellow, for me at least, in my opinion, is all about to change. This part, and I think the next part after it, is what I've seen a lot of people have strong emotions towards. So we'll see what happens. So as you can see, I just finished the happy years, and I'm very much still trying to process what just happened. But I don't think I've given an update since after part 3, so now I've read both Axiom of Equality and the happy years. And let me tell you, I haven't felt like sobbing yet, but I have felt like screaming. And it's not that I haven't felt sad. I have felt sad. I've felt all the emotions, but the strongest, most prominent one has been rage. Pure rage. Like, I'm telling you, if these characters were real, I would be in jail. I would be in jail because of the hit list of people I would assassinate in the name of Jude St. Francis. Starting with Brother Luke. I believe we're now aware of all of Jude's trauma. I mean, at least I think we are. I don't know how there could be more. And yes, it is everything that everyone says it is. It is devastating. It's heartbreaking. It is almost unfathomable in the worst part about it, these evil, despicable adults, especially Brother Luke, reading about the way that he manipulated Jude is what made me so angry. And I can't even remind myself, like, oh, he's not real, he's just a character, he doesn't exist. Because there are real life Brother Lukes in the world. There are real life despicable adults who have said the things that he said to Jude. And just everything that unfolds after he leaves the monastery, what he has to do to survive, like, it makes your stomach hurt. It is hard to read. There's no other explanation for it. It's just like... We also figured out how he got his injury with his legs, and Dr. Traylor would also be on this hypothetical hit list. Now, I knew better than to expect that the happy years would actually be happy, but I absolutely was not expecting it to end the way that it did. But now after reading that, it's making me question the little snippet that I saw that I spoiled for myself and what I think happens. So I'm pretty sure I'm gonna finish today. There's only this much left of the book, and I've seen people's reactions to the ending. Like, I think like the last 50 pages or so. So I know something's coming, and I know that it somehow gets worse. I do not know how this book could get worse. I don't know how this book could get sadder, but apparently it will. And I've still made it through without crying. So we'll see if that's what does it. So I finished, and I didn't cry. I made it through the whole thing, and I did not cry. Now, there were a couple times where I felt it in me, like there was the potential for it to happen, but it just never happened. Now, I wasn't expecting to cry really because, like I said, like, books don't normally make me cry. And I think part of the problem was also, throughout the whole thing, I was thinking about whether or not I was gonna cry. So I think that probably took me out of it a little bit. I wasn't fully immersed in the story. And before I go on and share my overall thoughts of the book, I think I'm going to do a little bit of a spoiler section because there are just a couple things that I want to mention. So if you don't want me to spoil certain things, then skip this part. Willem dying was the last thing I expected to happen in this book. Like, I was shocked. That part literally hit me. I was about to say that part hit me like a truck, but it's not appropriate given the way that he went out. When I filmed my little update right after I finished the Happy Years, I still hadn't even realized that he died. At that part, I did not realize that they all died. I had to read a little bit into Dear Comrade for it to finally sink in my head and for me to realize that she just killed them. And going back to the part that I spoiled for myself, the part that I saw was page 797. It's at the very end. I saw the first line of this paragraph. It says, on the second anniversary of your death, we went to Rome. And I saw that and I was just like, oh, Jude's dead. Because that made sense. I was expecting that. I knew that was going to happen. But that's who I thought they were talking about. I was wrong. They were talking about Willem right there. They were talking about Willem's death right there. Also, throughout the book, there are direct and indirect references to the title, and like, there are all these interpretations of what the title could mean. But there's one direct reference in this book that will forever be what I think of when I read the title. On page 473, Brother Luke is telling Jude that when he's with the clients, he needs to show a little life. When I read that, I near about threw the book across the room. Like, why did she have to do that? Because that will always be what I think about now. Even though there are so many other references, there are so many interpretations of this title, that's what I'm gonna think of. I know I've said a lot of surface level things throughout this video, and part of that is because I was trying to avoid spoilers, but also I feel like this book is just So much more than I'll ever be able to actually articulate. This is 100% a book that will sit with you for a long time after you read it. It is the type of book that takes a little piece of you. You will never forget about this book. You will never forget the characters. You will never forget the story. You know, some people criticize this book because they're like, what's the point? There's no character development. Jude goes through trauma and then never gets better. And it's like, yeah, some people just don't get better. So I think this book is just meant to be experienced. I mean, at times it's a beautiful experience. It is beautifully written. I think that is the best thing about this book. I think that is why people like it so much, because of the beautiful writing. But at times it's disturbing, and at times it's heartbreaking. You have to decide whether or not you want to have that kind of experience. And it's not a decision to be had lightly. You do need to check the trigger warnings. I will say though, based off of all the ways I've seen people react to this book, I did expect it to be a little bit worse than it actually was. And I really hope that doesn't make me sound insane. Like, don't get me wrong, there were definitely parts of this book that were so disturbing to read and so upsetting. But maybe I've just read a lot of, like, I like to read horror books too, and a lot of times those obviously have like a really graphic description, so I don't know if that's the type of thing I was expecting with this book, but like seeing people's reactions, I was expecting this to be like the most horrifying, grotesque book I've ever read, and that's just not the case. That's not how I felt about it. Overall, it's beautifully written. It is the type of book that is going to stick in your brain. I think that this is also the type of book that you only reread after like many years have passed and you are in a different part of your life with a different perspective on things. Like, I'm 23 now, and I could only see myself rereading this book when I'm like 50 and I'm a completely different person. I don't think I could actually rate this book, and that's not because it's just like, oh, better than a 5, it's the best book I've ever read, because I don't feel that way about it. Like, I think if I had to rate it, I would give it probably like a 4 or a 4.5. But when I think about other books that I've read, other 4s, other 4.5s, it's not equivalent, but I wouldn't give it a 5. There's something holding me back from giving it a 5, and I don't quite know what it is. I think I was expecting a little bit more out of the ending. Like, the way it ended, it was predictable, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing because it's fairly obvious the way that it's going to end, but I was just expecting something to happen where, like, you know, sometimes when you read books and the author does that thing where like you've read the whole book and then at the end it's like, oh, the whole book was the character's manuscript that they were writing the entire time, or something like that. Like, I was expecting the book to like somehow have been one of their projects, and now that I think about some of the things that were in the book, like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I was just expecting like something that would explain, you know, how it was divided up the way that it was and how each part was named what it was. Like, I was just expecting it to be one of their projects somehow, which again doesn't make sense because none of them were writers. Like, they were a lawyer, an architect, an actor, and an artist, but I was just expecting like that type of ending where it was like the whole book like was something in a significant way. I don't know if I'm making any sense. That's, I guess, what is holding me back from giving this a 5. But I guess that's it. I now feel like I need to go read a fantasy book, and one that is as far away from reality as I can possibly get, because I don't like to read books about the real world and real problems. I don't really know what to say for an outro yet, but I hope you enjoyed. I hope this entertained you at least a little bit. You know, I hope you decide to stick around, maybe subscribe, give a like. I do plan on making more videos, so yeah, hope to see you there.